All right, everyone, we are back, joined by a very special guest. Paz is in the virtual studio, at least. Hello, Paz.
Good evening.
Paz is will be well known to some of you, but probably not to others. Paz, what are you best known for? What kind of cool things do you do?
That is an interesting question. I like to tell myself that I repopularized the milk bar meme format. If you
Very
have no
nice.
idea what that is, if that's too deep a cut even for the people who do already know who I am,
Are
then
we talking
shame on you.
a
But
Morocco bar with a little ultraviolence, that kind of stuff?
oh no, milk bar is the actual name of that meme where it's the dude yelling at the clearly uninterested girl.
Oh, okay. Never mind. I went all Stanley Kubrick. Yes, yes,
No.
yes.
um, but despite that joke falling flat, the actual answer you're fishing for is I am one quarter of Timeline Earth. I am the voice behind the Scarlet Thread Society sub project on there, and I am the pioneer of a book club. We
Yes.
cover all sorts of esoteric, weird, and spooky material. That is our bit.
Well, so we'll let you shill twice in the episode. So yeah, everyone check out Timeline Earth first and foremost. I would say, become a board member. It's a good investment on Patreon. Scarlet Thread Society is the premier. Actually, you undersold it. Pause. It's the premier. It's the premier show in the Timeline Earth family. And there's a really cool book club that's connected to it. So everyone go on to Patreon and check out Scarlet Thread Society. Well, tell us what we're reading. Pause. What are we reading?
Well, what's being read this month is the first work by John Keel. That book is Jadu, and it is all about his travels through Africa, the Middle East, and eventually Asia in his early adulthood, and some of the formative experiences that dragged him into the actual world of Fortiana, where previously he had just been a dabbler in stage tricks and stage magic.
It's a great book. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And if anyone, dear listeners, if any of you, if you're listening to this, you like weird, strange people and weird, strange things and weird, strange topics, Pause is kind of like the godfather of it all. I really think, we're in
Well,
the
let's not
presence.
go that far.
Well, I
Maybe
mean,
for a small portion of Twitter, I might be.
you you did make me an offer I couldn't refuse. So I mean, and yeah. Well, Paz was very kind to join us, coming from the Midwest, to talk about one of, I think it's a share. I'm gonna get. we've talked about it. It's a shared favorite show, amongst our many favorite shows, X Files. If anyone remembers, we covered last year. It was last summer, and so we're revisiting X Files. Last summer we covered, me and Elliot, who was also a board member, covered Jose Chung's From Outer Space, and so I figured, hey, let me politely harangue Paz to come on, and we'll talk about another fun, goofy, and let's say monster. It's a monster of the week episode. It's not connected to the broader, so many of the broader themes of the show. Bad Blood. So spoilers will abound. So please go watch the episode. It's a very fun episode, and these are X Files episodes. They're like what 45 minutes, pretty doable.
Right
Uh,
about, yeah.
yeah, season 5. So this is right when the show is really kind of like hitting it's well into its like main strides. It's going strong. I like to think seasons 4 and 5 I think are my favorites. If ever, yeah. This is the so spoilers abound. This is the vampire episode. There was a pause. So, have you? So you watched this episode? Have you done like? Have you seen the pre? There was that previous vampire episode from like season 2 with like the weird death metal guys. Did you remember? Do you remember that one?
Yeah, and frankly, it's good that I did rewatch this one because when you first pitched this to me, I was actually thinking of that episode until I went through the episode list on Hulu and found this one and realized, no, this is the other vampire episode
Yes.
we're doing.
There was a maybe somewhat abortive attempt at a vampire episode earlier on in X-Files, and I think it falls pretty flat. It kind of doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and took itself way too seriously. This episode, Bad Blood, is the opposite. I think it at least in my estimation, it does not take itself seriously and is a great episode. It's I had forgotten actually how much I love this one. Um,
So, something people don't necessarily realize about the X Files, but they really should, is if you're not keen to this, it's not actually a horror TV show. If you called it anything, I think you'd call it like an action adventure. But for as good a job as they do at being really creepy and scary sometimes, it's primarily like it is a buddy cop movie, but it's humorous too. The X Files is genuinely funny, even when it's trying to be serious. And this episode, as you're saying, is a prime example of how you get some of that. You know, they work in little things and they're playing with ideas. And at this point, I think our two leads had been working together long enough that they were able to play off each other a lot more effectively than they did in the earlier seasons. And you get a really nice grasp of that throughout.
totally agree. Very nice. Yes, that is a very good sort of estimation of the show of this episode. Yes. Um, yeah, it's again. We this is jumping around a bit and pause again. You're very kind to just jump in, but I figured if you're jumping in, might as well jump in on an episode that's in the main part where the show's really found its feet and it's running smoothly. Because some of those early ones, yeah, I would not have done that to you. Oh dear, pause. You thought I was going to bring you on for the bad vampire one? No, 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 no. I would not have done that to you.
Well, and to be clear, despite being the bad vampire one, there's very few X File episodes that I did not enjoy. You know, you have to start to get towards the end where they're starting to get just really haggard and it's not fun anymore.
Yeah, yeah, but I mean, as long once Duchovny left and was in those fights with Fox about what I forget exactly what the fight was, pay, wasn't it? Something like that. He was
Oh,
getting
I'm
kind of
sure. And you know
yeah.
what? As much as I really like Duchovny as an actor and I think highly of his skill, I bet that dude's probably one of those guys that's a nightmare to work with.
Well, I've heard some tales of his predilections, and which is great because that we might even get it touch on that in this discussion because they kind of work that into his character. They work that into Fox Mulder, where he has this strange. I mean, obviously, Mulder is obsessed with the occult, the strange, the weird, but you get the sense as the show goes that there might be a sort of an erotic quality to some of that. There's some little hints and things that just get thrown in there.
Well,
So
and
yeah,
if nothing else, between his work on Twin Peaks and then later Californication, you start to
exactly.
get the vibe that he really is a weird dude.
Yes. Oh yeah, I know. And he really is the everyone says this, but it bears repeating is that Duchovny is kind of the direct connection between Twin Peaks and X Files because he starred in both as FBI as I guess totally different kinds of strange FBI agents in both shows.
Well, so it's worth noting, and actually, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to blow up your show. You're going to
Blow
have
it
to
up.
forgive
That's
me.
why I bring you on.
The thing is, he's not even an FBI agent in Twin Peaks.
I thought he
The rest
was.
of them are FBI agents. If you recall
Oh,
correctly,
he's DEA.
he's DEA.
DEA. Yes, yes,
And
yes. You're
that's what
right.
makes Twin Peaks The Return even freaking stranger because in The Return, he's the chief of staff of the FBI, which is, to my knowledge, not even a position that exists.
Oh, I have. Yes, you have already. It's okay. It's a good blow up. I have so many. We need to do some episodes on the return season because I have some stuff to say about that. But yeah,
I do
no,
still need to finish watching it, so I'll put the pin in back there. But yeah, that's worth mentioning. Like,
it is.
he's
That's
the
a.
direct connection, but he's not even FBI.
You're right. I'm totally misremembered season two. Anyhow, thank you. Pause. Yeah, the people are like, wait, I thought this was on X Files. Well, this is what happens when you get to
In
esoteric
my
hostile.
perfect world,
Yeah,
the X Files and Twin Peaks would be in the same
they'd have
universe.
to be. They'd have to be. And I mean, Twin Peaks is a wonderful show in and of itself, but we should thank it for giving us X Files, giving us another wonderful show.
Yeah, and I mean, it's impossible to understate just how much ground Twin Peaks really broke because you would not see something like the X-Files if Twin Peaks hadn't taken its stab at it first.
Oh, for sure. And it showed that that kind of a paranormal investigation show, which wasn't new. There was, things like the Night Stalker, Kolchak Night Stalker. If you've watched any of those, if you want to go, those are real deep cuts. But from like the '70s, had sort of had a little had some success, and they're fairly okay for what they are. But Twin Peaks really classed it up because you have Lynch behind the wheel, and it's like it shows people that this kind of a strange, bizarre, weird investigative drama can be really hilarious, really scary, really good all at the same time. Um, and X Files just kind of, we unfortunately, as we all know, who've watched Twin Peaks ends on something of a cliffhanger in season two. No spoilers, but there's a huge cliffhanger, and there was no resolution for like over 2 decades, and so X Files kind of is maybe like the X Files steps in to be like, hey, it's gonna be okay. There will still be spookies that we can investigate, and you get wonderful seasons of X Files. So yeah, and then we got some Twin Peaks. So all's well that ends well. Um,
Well,
yeah,
but there was some rough patches in the middle
there's rough
because did
patches.
you watch any of the X-Files attempted sequel series?
I did, and I actually really liked one of those episodes because
There
it's
was it was a mini series, right? There was like 6, 8 episodes in like 2014 or something.
There was. There was one of the episodes I really liked because it was actually an old script that that they like updated to the 2014 or whenever it came out, and it was a script that never got made, and it finally got made. Um so Darren Morgan, I don't know how much you know about this, Paz, but Darren Morgan was a writer in early X Files, and a lot of this kind of strange, weird, funny, like the funny episodes, started out with he wrote those. A lot of those early funny ones, like I believe Humbug, uh, Clive Buckman's Final Repose, Jose Chung's From Outer Space,
It was
um,
actually 2018. I just had to double
2018.
check. Sorry for
Yeah,
that.
you're good. Darren Morgan wrote a lot of the goofy ones, and then he wrote this script called Mulder and Scully Meet the Were Monster or versus the Were Monster, and then that got made when they tried to reboot X Files, and so I was happy that at least that episode got like to be filmed. But yeah, the reboot kind of really failed, unfortunately, and maybe they should have never tried, right? But you hold out hope as a fan. You're like, well, but I like Mulder Scully, so it's just they're old and it doesn't work as well because more than them being old, right? It's just not the '90s. There's something about that, like
Yeah, it suffered from vibe shift in culture.
oh yeah, and it just they were filming on digital, lots of things like digital cameras, right? Like when I was watching Bad Blood, such a dark episode, um, because it's like it's funny. It's supposed to be in Texas, but they filmed it in Vancouver, BC. So they're like, it's the winter. I'm like, that's not what Texas looks like in the winter, but I'll buy it. It's fine. It's a really wet
Sure.
Texas. But
One of
it's
those suspending disbelief moments.
Yep. But it's great because it's so dark because that's what the Pacific Northwest looks like in the winter. And when you get the dark spookiness of the Northwest, and then you get like somewhat grainy or grainier type. I don't know exactly how they were shooting it. What kind of? I'm assuming film. Um, it's just a wonderful kind of look, right? That when they rebooted the show, it just looked too clean. It looked like Fringe.
Sterile.
Yeah, it looked like Fringe, which was sort of the X Files inspired other show that wasn't anywhere near as good. And yeah,
I did like Fringe, but it
oh
was trying too hard, especially early on.
yeah,
When it started playing with its own main story and its own themes, I think Fringe improved dramatically.
okay, I'll
But
definitely give it a
until
shot.
that point, when they were still doing their creature feature run and their Motley Crue buddy cop thing,
Yeah.
that did feel like a cheap knockoff.
Well, maybe I need to give it a sec. Maybe I need to push through those episodes because I was like, I think when I tried to watch Fringe and I just went back to watching X Files, I was like, yeah, I'll just, I like this thing. Um, so in this episode, Mulder and Scully get called to, well, Mulder. Well, it's an interesting episode because you get two totally different versions of what happened. Well, somewhat different versions of what happened, but the versions differ quite drastically. There's cattle exsanguinations near Dallas, and so who do they call? Not Ghostbusters. They call Mulder Scully. Uh, Scully's not happy about having to go out and deal with these, random cow mutilations. However, there is one human death, so FBI can get involved. Mulder drags her out, and it's very funny because the first so the episode starts with Mulder killing what appears to be a vampire at first with a stake through the heart, but might just be a local young man.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, and so the Mulder and Scully are having to like get their stories straight to go talk to Skinner, played by the great Mitch Pileggi, to like make an official statement. And so you get to hear Scully's version of events first, and so as she's talking, they're filming that, they're bringing that to life on film, and then Mulder tells his version of events, and then you get to see how it happened according to him. And it's funny because you get the same exact scenes more or less, but the outcomes are different, or like the affective characters are different, or like Luke Wilson as the local sheriff either has buck teeth or does not have buck teeth. There's just all these wonderful little
And
differences.
Luke Wilson, what a great choice to play that role, by the way. Just inspired.
Oh yeah, and he's a native Texan. He you can tell he leans into it in the right kind of way. In Scully's version, he's the charming Texan sheriff, and in Mulder's version, he's sort of like the hick Texan sheriff, and he plays both very nicely. Yeah, does not overplay either of those actually. But so the episode is playing with differences in accounts and different ways of telling the story. Um, and yeah, I mean, as per usual, Scully doesn't believe any of it. Oh, we don't really know what happened. Of course, Mulder's like is willing to see that this entire small town is actually populated by vampires, which is a very funny idea. They're reformed vampires. They pay their taxes. They're good neighbors, right? They're not trying to cause
Hmm.
any harm. They might suck down a few cows every once in a while, but right, better than people. But yeah, but then of course you get some human deaths too, and that's sort of what brings FBI in, and so we could probably just that's just a brief intro to the episode. Um, like I think the episode does such a great job of playing with expectation. Maybe that's one place we could start because yeah, like you're kind of you're even up until the pretty much the very end, you're wondering, are there actual vampires here? Or are there not? Or is it literally just Mulder believing there's vampires and then getting drugged and then really believing there's vampires?
Well, and that's just it, right? Even the episode itself steadfastly refuses to actually answer the question. You just don't know.
But yeah, I mean, maybe the parts where there are some sort of vampire eye effects and things like that are just Mulder having, I guess late like ongoing drug effects or something like that. It is
Well, and
difficult.
that's how I interpreted the
Interesting.
episode. Is that it was intentionally ambiguous, and that was a result of the fact that he'd been dosed at least once over the course of the episode. It's possible there were a couple instances there, I think, but
This is fascinating because I mean obviously he's dosed, but I never interpreted it as the effects of the drug are continuing meets his belief in the occult are continuing to make him see vampires. But that's fascinating.
and you
That
know what? That could be just strictly colored by my context for this sort of thing. When you think about the role of drug use in the occult and the ability of psychoactives to amplify various faith effects in a person.
That's a good point. I didn't think of that at all. This is why I love talking to you, Pause. And it is interesting because on a hyper meta level, that in our discussion of this episode, I am slotting perhaps more into Mulder, and you're perhaps slotting more into Scully's archetype because you're willing to deal to operate on the level that maybe there are not vampires at all. Whereas I kind of was like, oh yeah, he's drugged, but only just so that Ronnie Strickland, played by Patrick Renna from The Sandlot, by the way, which is great, uh, who's this sort of supposedly misfit vampire who is tired of fitting in and wants to be a vampire like in the good old days, ripping people's throats apart and stuff like that. But in order to do so, he has to drug people. So he drugs Mulder. So I interpreted that the drugs just being as literally like to make him an easy target, easy prey. But yeah, maybe maybe he is really just uh, a a serial killer who is just acting out his vampiric role, but not really supernatural. Yeah, I never. Man, now I'm thinking about the episode completely differently. Although it still
Well,
doesn't
don't let
explain
me
how.
dissuade you. Don't let
Yeah.
me dissuade you too much because
Well,
I, for one,
yeah.
am perfectly comfortable saying yes, it was
Well, no, I
vampires.
mean, no, I'm not. You have your you don't you have your own opinions, sir, and I'm here to I'm here to hear them. Yeah, no, I guess it doesn't account for why, like, you know, after he's staked, and they take the stake out, the medical examiner takes the stake out, he gets back up, which by the way is pretty common in vampire folklore. Like you don't want to take the
Yeah,
stake
this
out. Yeah.
the stake is not about killing vampires in a lot of cases. It's about keeping them in their grave.
Yep.
And I'm not sure when that sort of shifted in vampire lore, but the stake's not what kills them. It keeps them in place so you can behead them.
I think one of the main, so I'm not going to say it's the first, but one of the, obviously, I mean everyone says it, but it is kind of true. Bram Stoker did create a lot of new vampire tropes, and they even say that, they even mention that in the episode, which is kind of nice. Yeah, I love Bram Stoker, I love Dracula, it's a great book, but a lot of it is invented. The idea that you would just, staking as to destroy the heart, yeah, is it like a Victorian sort of reinterpretation of what staking is, as Paz quite rightly pointed out. The original idea was to actually like like peg them to the ground so that they couldn't get back out again. In some, if you if you look at vampire burials, I don't know if you probably have, Pause. If you look at archaeological finds of people, of suspected vampires, in places like the Balkans is a great place for vampires. Serbia, you can see some of these. Um, they're huge poles, like they're long poles. They're not a stake like you think. They're not like the little Van Helsing tiny little stake that you just hit with a mallet. It's like a gigantic pole that's driven through the body, through the coffin into the ground, usually, to provide like a huge amount of to make it really really hard to get back out, if even if you wanted to, even if you could. Yeah. Um, but yeah, so I guess there's a lot of, I guess on that point, there's a lot of fun little callbacks or little drops of cool vampire lore throughout the episode. It's interesting because the wounds that are the victims, whether they be cows or humans, receive are like little fang marks or deep fang marks. But assuming the vampires in the episode are real, none of them really have fangs. The reason there's fang marks is because Ronnie Strickland, the vampire who's trying to be an even scarier vampire, is wearing fake vampire fangs to 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 accentuate his ability
What
to
his desire to be feral,
yeah, to be
basically.
feral. Yeah, he's like a feral vampire. uh it's very very funny, obviously, and it leads to it plays into the lack of certainty that Paz has been talking about in what is really going on, because like even in the first scene where Mulder supposedly kills Ronnie Strickland the vampire, when when he opens his mouth, he takes out the fake fangs and goes, "Oh shit!" Well, they don't even say shit. They cut to the intro. Obviously, it's the '90s, and you can't say shit on Fox. But yeah, that is also, I mean, what I appreciate about this, as I'll put my academic hat on for 2 seconds, it is what I do. One thing I really appreciate about this episode is, despite being in some ways very, maybe you could say postmodern or even metamodern in its, it's competing, sometimes conflicting accounts of what happened. The vampire lore is pretty uh well done, because they, like, Mulder says, like, not all vampires act the same. Different cultures have different vampires with different traits, different weaknesses, different strengths. And not all vampires have fangs. That actually most
That's one
vampires.
thing I really consistently love about the X-Files in general. You can tell when they were doing these episodes, they cared about getting their woo right. And that goes unappreciated, I think, sometimes, but it shouldn't because it's a big deal to take the time to get it right.
It is, and I mean, I think maybe this is just means I'm getting older, but I don't think people care so much anymore. I think people are willing to invent their own woo on the fly just because continuity or it's just easier. But yeah, it's a very good point.
Well, I think it's got a lot to do with that whole culture decay and the obsessive need to subvert expectations that comes out of modern American culture. I guess I don't know if it's this way in other places, but if you think about, I think one of the driving reasons people on the right wing complain about a stuck culture isn't so much that the culture itself is stuck, so much as the people in control of cultural and artistic creation in this country don't actually know how to create anything. So they're just digging through what's already has been. And instead of riffing on it, they're looking for ways to tear it down explicitly.
I would agree. I would agree. And it's weird because as I get older, and I think I'm a little bit older than you, Pause. Um, as I get older, it is weird when I watch X Files now. I think of it as only being like 10 years ago. When it's
Not
not.
quite.
It's like I'm like, oh,
Though,
that's
to
just
be
10 years
fair
ago.
to you, reboot was less than 10 years ago.
Exactly. But so and then I have to remind myself, oh no, 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 this is like old now because I am old now. Uh and yeah, it is it's the and then I'm sort of I snap back to, oh my gosh, that's right, this was 1990, I want to say 8,
Right
1998 that this
about,
episode came
yeah.
out. Yeah, and I'm like, okay, so that was a long time ago. So yeah, it's not like thing, there, but there has been a steady stream. You this is essentially time travel when you watch X-Files, right? You're watching a cultural product from well over 20 years ago, and you
It is an actual generation
yeah,
years old.
yeah, and I mean, in some ways perhaps you can see the beginnings of some of, I don't want to say even proto woke, but some of the kind of stuff that we see that Hollywood is flooded with now, our pop culture is flooded with now. But at the same time, I mean, I think Chris Carter is also a somewhat, I don't want to say he's our guy, but he's kind of our guy from what I've heard. He's
Well, he's closer on the spectrum to us than he is the opposite outlier.
yeah.
He's on their end of the middle, and that just looks like our guy from here,
Okay, right. Yes,
is
well
my
said.
opinion of it.
No, 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 that's a good contextualization. But it is interesting because at the same time, so much of the X Files. I mean, like Paz said, the details, the research, they're willing to actually research vampire lore just for like some supposedly throwaway lines, but in reality they're not throwaway lines because it shows that Mulder really knows what he's talking about theoretically, right? Whether he knows what he's doing is another question in this
Well,
episode.
that's the whole key. That's the conceit of his character. He knows exactly what he's talking about, even if he doesn't always know what he's doing.
Well said.
And if I can continue to riff
Go,
on that for
continue.
just a
Go.
moment,
Yeah.
that goes back to the absolute heart of all detective stories as they've ever been. He is the armchair detective. And when the detective story was invented, just prior to the sort of penny dreadful pulp era, it was all about the armchair detective. The guy who could sit in his office or sit in his home study and just from the facts laid out on a table tell you exactly what happened. And Sherlock Holmes was the first to actually subvert that trope because he'd go to the scene and put things together. And detectives like Fox Mulder are a return to the armchair detective in that, well, yes, Fox is on the scene. He already knows, he's already assembled it in his head. He's only going to the scene to demonstrate, usually to his partner Scully, that he's already figured it out.
Right. And then Scully will like trip on something or get drugged or get hit on the head, and then she won't see the monster really. And then it's like, almost got it, almost got him, Fox, eh? And he's just like looks at her like, you got to be kidding me.
I
You
just
got
proved it to you explicitly, but you
I
still
know.
don't believe because you didn't see it.
Like in this episode, you were literally drugged by a literal vampire, assuming they were real. And you just yeah, it's just like I guess it's one of those unexplained mysteries, Mulder.
Still an X-File. I didn't
It's
see it.
just I mean, I think in my real life, I am more of a Mulder than a Scully. I have a Scully side for sure, but I am more of a Mulder. And I feel so bad. I mean, there's a level of pathos that's hilarious, particularly in this episode. He's getting drugged by vampires, almost killed by them, and then also dragged rather, behind a runaway RV. He's like, he just just his this whole case goes so south for him, and Scully just will not even, because she's Scully, right? She can't break. She has to be the cold scientific type. But
It's
it's
her
just it's very
absolute
funny.
archetype. It's bone deep.
Yeah.
And those commitments to their characters, I think, are actually also part of what makes the show. They don't let either of their characters bend or evolve as it goes on. They are who they are.
Yeah. Which is, I think also, if I may, um to take it back to the whole, Chris Carter is more of our kind of guy discussion. I think that might have to do, now this episode was written by Vince Gilligan, so Breaking Bad fame. He wrote many of the X-Files episodes, many of the good ones. I like Vince Gilligan. I don't know where he kind of stands on the spectrum, but I still enjoy his writing. um but the show in general, that, like you said, Puz, the character's commitment to archetype, I think, is something that makes it feel older, because it is, but also somewhat timeless, even though it is very much a show of the late 90s and early 2000s. But it's dealing with these sort of timeless monsters, right? Timeless, unexplained things. There's always been lights in the sky. People have always gone missing. What's really going on? Um, and then like the archetypes, the strong archetypes that Mulder and Scully inhabit, it's mythic, right? Like, archetypal storytelling like this is a very old way of doing things, which is to say, the standard way that human storytelling has been told for most of human existence, right? Before people
The
start.
obsession with character trauma and development is a symptom of theater kid occupied culture. It just
Amen.
is.
Amen. Amen. And it's interesting too, because like it's not like these characters haven't had trauma. I mean, like, the whole reason Mulder does what he does is because his sister was abducted, right? Supposedly, that's what he remembers, right? um and then Scully does what she does because she has this, like, well, it's interesting, right? Because she has that whole thing when her dad dies early on, like, she sees him, and is it real, is it not? She has to know, and both of them have to know, but they go about finding the knowledge in very different paths, and that's what's just so cool, because they both have a traumatic background, I guess, like any human does, but then they go do something with it. It drives them towards, maybe not conclusions, but definitely actions. And it makes sense, but it's not like, and there are the episodes that are more like the broader show mythology ones, where they're like, is Scully pregnant with the baby alien? No, she's just Gillian Anderson's pregnant that season. Or like, oh, what really happened with Fox Mulder's father? There are some of those episodes, but that's not like the only thing that's happening. It's not just, like you said, just
It's
continual
not even the
rehashing.
primary thing. Those are as much creature of the week as creature of the week are.
Right. But even in those instances where they are dealing theoretically with quote unquote past trauma, it's always like in a concrete way. They're going, like, doing something about it. They're not just sitting around talking about their feelings. Which, again, it's just
Happens
I am
all too often in modern dramas.
yeah, and I am just this shows you I'm just getting really old, because I'm like, man, they just don't make him like they used to. Slaps his knee. But
Well,
I
they
mean,
really don't, though.
they
They
really
really
don't. I mean,
don't.
just because I'm getting old doesn't mean I'm wrong, right? Like, maybe they just literally don't make them like they used to. Yeah. And then, like, also the way that, so this is the reason I kind of assigned you this episode, pauses, because I thought it'd be a fun one, because it is a fun one. Um, the willingness of the show, even like 2 seasons previous, in season 3, or even season 2, or even, you could say, even season 1, as you say, pause, like, there's a lot of humor, subtle humor in the show, and the show is willing to make fun of itself, and it's willing to
Like the perfect example being how Mulder talks in Scully's memory of the events as opposed to how it actually happened or how he perceives it as have happened.
Yeah.
Did
Yeah,
you pick up on that? I'm
I
sure
did.
you
He's like
did. The
yeah, he's like,
differences in his own dialogue, the
"Oh,
way
yeah,
you
what."
can obviously tell the memory grates on her just because of what she thinks of him.
Yep. When he slaps the ticket to DFW, "Boo, yeehaw, going to Texas," in her version, and in his version, it's like, "Hey, looks like we're gonna go to Texas." Like softly puts the ticket down. which which is just hilarious and also really kind of underscores the kind of the I know everyone talks about this with X-Files, but it is, I mean, the will they won't they kind of romantic tension, because like the way that like Mulder recalls dropping the news on Scully that they're going to be going to investigate the exsanguinations is like, if you've ever been in a relationship, this is how you talk to your girlfriend or your wife, like, "Hey, so looks like next Saturday I'll be going out with friend." And, you have to kind of like, is this okay? Don't attack me. Whereas, right, obviously, from the female perspective, it's like, oh my gosh, you're just like you're so excited about hanging out with
What
those
am I
guys.
gonna do with this guy? First, he uses my massage chair at the hotel. Then he takes my takeout dinner and or
Yeah,
whatever the hell they were. I think those were the two instances that really stuck out to me.
yeah, they
There was
had the
something
massage
with,
bed, the massage
yeah,
bed,
that's what it
the
was. Yeah.
massage bed. Yeah. Yeah, he stole my he's eating my pizza. Yeah, it turns out that pizza was drugged, so maybe it was a good thing that Scully didn't do it. It didn't eat it. But yeah, it's just it's just yeah. Yeah. And like, yeah, when Mulder comes back to the hotel room covered in mud, in Scully's version he's like wet, like, oh my gosh, like nonchalant, right? Like, this was like, I'm just having a blast doing Hardy Boy shit, I'm Fox Mulder. And in his version he's like, I just got drugged for however long behind a runaway RV, and I'm really tired, and you just don't want to help me in this, oh, I gotta do another autopsy. Yeah. It's very funny. Yeah, just like you said, the total commitment to character and the ability at this stage in the show for each of the characters to, or each of the actors specifically, to play off each other so well is just, it's chef's kiss. I'm
Yeah, it's marvelous, frankly.
and
To
the thing is,
really
it's basic acting. They're good actors. I love both of them. Duchovny and Anderson are both two of my faves, but like, they're good actors, but it's not like they're not, it's just I feel like this is maybe just to really inhabit the old person archetype. I feel like just standards in some ways were much higher, even for a silly goofy X-Files episode. You're like, oh yeah, but you're a good show, so your actors are really going to kind of try. I don't know, maybe it's the, if we're going to keep ragging on theater kids, there's just lack of commitment to scenes, like, or maybe it's just that.
well, and the other thing to think is how much of this is there's a fancy psych word for it. That I'm just not going to be able to conjure
Well, you can
off
just
my
talk around
tongue
it, explain.
tonight.
Yeah, yeah.
It's the idea survivorship bias. There we go.
Yes, yes, yes.
The X Files made it and stayed relevant, and the bad stuff didn't. So of course, it all looks good in retrospect. It's the airplane with the holes in it conundrum.
Yeah. Well, and I think part of it too is, and this is again not a unique, not a revelation at all, but I think it bears repeating. There is just so much content. There's so much media content. There's so much schlock that is just pumped out. Every streaming service has got to do, the for June, it's just all LGBTQ. It's just all, you got to check all the boxes. Everything is just, I mean, in a way the archetypes haven't left us, we just have bad archetypes now, right? Like, it's just
Well, and
box
that's
checking
certainly part of it. But at the
crap.
same time, frankly, I can't say I've watched a lot of recent TV dramas. In fact, I can't really remember the last new one I watched. But the reason I kind of fell out of love with a lot of TV is because the archetypes just went away.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, so in some ways it's a chicken or egg question, right? Like, is it bad, is the schlock, is it bad because there's schlock, or is the schlock there because it's bad? Right, like,
And you know what? I definitely think it's the later, but that's probably an open question, and it's probably going to remain one.
yeah. And as we've mentioned, I mean, I think they really did try with the X-Files reboot. I give them props and credit for trying. They did try. They did really try. But like you said, the cultural moment had passed, and conspiracy is now so mainstream. I think that's part of it too. Is that conspiracy theories are so mainstream now because, well, as you like to say, pause, because we're living in one. Uh, to sort of parrot Captain Barbarossa there a little bit. We're living in one. We're living in, and everyone kind of
Hmm.
knows we're living in a conspiracy theory. So
Yeah.
it's not as, you know, exciting. It's sort of more
It doesn't
depressing.
hit quite the same way.
It's like, yeah, I know we're living in a conspiracy theory, and I can't pay my taxes, and it's bad, or I can't afford to eat food because they're conspiracy theorying my money away as we speak. I understand. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, but they did try with the reboot. But I think with that, if anything, it just underscores that reboots are not the solution. You can't reboot
No,
yourself
they're just not.
out of this. Yeah.
I would offer another example if I can
Please,
detour
please,
just another
please.
moment
Yeah,
longer.
you go take
And
it.
I think this kind of really underscores exactly what we're talking about with that, too. Because, as you might know, a little bit less maybe on my perceived brand, but still well within my wheelhouse for the people who know me, I love the TV Western Justified.
Oh, I do too.
And they did try to do another uh, Elmore story
Okay.
with the same cast. Even Oliphant is
Oh,
back
interesting.
as
Yeah.
Raylan Givens, and it's Justified City Primeval.
Okay. Was it good?
It was okay at best.
Yeah.
The time had just kind of passed. The
Yeah.
characters were older and they had developed as they aged, which is fine. That part of it's reasonable because they played straight with it. But at the same time, that moment for the big TV Western, which did have its own revival phase, it was just done.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't even bother with the. I actually, you know what? I confess, I didn't even finish. I should actually go back and finish Justified because I did enjoy the. I think I watched that through. I watched up to the end of the Mags Bennett season, whatever that was, two,
That
three.
that was just season 2, but yeah,
Okay.
that was a great arc all of its own
Oh,
too.
yeah, in and of itself.
Um,
Yeah.
it's either 3 or 4 that's a
Okay.
little drag. There's a
Okay.
drag right there in the middle, but it ends on a hugely powerful note too.
Okay. Well, I should do that because I do really appreciate both Timothy Oliphant and Walton Goggins. They're both really
Oh,
good.
they are brilliant. They are
Yeah.
both brilliant.
Yeah, very talented dudes. Yeah, but it's interesting that like even a show, so yeah, like even a show that was wonderfully, people love. I Justified is a modern classic, I would say, even just from the 2 seasons I saw. Um, even that, like, yeah, you can't bring it back. I mean, imagine if
And the
somebody,
point being is
yeah,
it's not even that old either, is the
no,
other
it's
thing. The
it's
reason
not
I
that
brought
old.
it up.
Yeah, I mean, and can you imagine if somebody did something like really ungodly? Like I hope they won't. I don't think they will, but try to like revive The Wire or something like that. Can you imagine just how bad that
Oh,
would be?
I Dude, if you just spoke that into existence, I'm never talking to you again.
It's just it was an example, but yes, the egregore will now latch onto it, and
Oh,
Dominic West will be like, "Yes, I will reprise the role." Yeah, I shall. Yeah, like, what are you gonna be like? You're in
you
the.
could not make that now, and you could not make it again.
I know. Yeah, but I mean that's another example of a show. One of my favorite shows is The Wire. I love The Wire, and you literally can't. Yeah, like you say, you cannot make that show now. It can't. It's all unrepeatable. Like it's all original. Like it has to be in that time, and it has to be in that place with those actors doing those things. There's just no way to recreate it. And I think in the end, what Paz and I are getting at is that people just need to get creating new shit. And I mean, that's also not like unique to us. Everyone says that, but it is really true. And I think it's easy when you watch, at least for me, when I watch older shows or movies, but particularly with shows such as X-Files, such as The Wire, shows I really love. Um, it's easy to get kind of nostalgic. You take the member berries, you eat the member berries, you feel real good eating the member berries, and then it's easy to get, the side effects of the member berries, which is, oh, they just don't make it like they used to, which obviously I'm dealing with right now. But I mean, yeah, of course you can't make it like they used to because every piece of art comes out of a certain time in a certain place with those people and that crew and that cast and that writer or whoever, right? Like it's just I think really we've just lowered our standards. I mean, I don't know how you take that pause, but I feel like it's just like audiences just don't have standards anymore. I
Well,
don't know what
and I
else to
think
say.
part of it too is here's your nefarious conspiracy angle for the episode.
Yes.
It's pretty well known that the major movie studios make some films explicitly to be tax write offs because of their unique carve outs.
Yeah.
There's no reason to believe that TV studios aren't also doing so.
Yeah.
So, how much of this garbage is getting made just to keep a business afloat? And I think that's especially relevant for streaming platforms because
Netflix.
Netflix is not actually profitable. Amazon Prime Video is not actually profitable, though the rest of Amazon certainly is.
Yeah.
And a lot of these other ones aren't either. So they're churning out write offs so they can look good on paper to continue to hoover up VC where they actually make their money.
Yeah. Yeah. It yeah, so maybe I'm overly harsh on the audience. Maybe it is just really, elites who hate us in the end. I mean, maybe that really is.
Well, by the same token, though, the fact that the normazoids out there will fawn over next Netflix latest slop every single time shows the audience deserves it when you shit talk them.
Yeah, I mean, I can think of an example with Netflix. So, feel free to disagree. I actually liked like the first season of Stranger Things. I really enjoyed. Um,
It felt like something different, and I
yeah,
did appreciate that.
and
At the time, it did.
at the time it did. But with each subsequent season, it really started getting like self-referential, but not in a fun way, like this episode of X-Files. It just got it was just like it's like at the if you've ever done I don't know if you've ever distilled alcohol pause, but like you get like the there's like the good part of the run and then you get the dregs at the end. Like when you're distilling schnapps or something like that. And it just felt like they were just burning through, right? Like they were just burning through everything that had been done before. And it was just like at the end of the run, it just starts tasting bad and you just don't want it anymore. It's only good for throwing in the fire and you just burn it or
And,
something
you
like that.
know, it's not that Netflix has never done a good show either. Because say what else you will about him being an elite globalist pedophile, but House of Cards was
Oh
spectacular.
yeah, very good. And some of their movies were good too. At least the movies they released. The one with Timothy Chalamet about Henry V, the King. The King is a really good movie. So it's not. Yeah, they have produced some really good stuff. House of Cards is like House of Cards brought back the Shakespearean soliloquy. And it is a great show. Yes, despite obviously all the horrible things about Spacey et al. Yeah. So there's moments of brilliance, but it just like I don't know. Like I can't even and the sad thing too is that it primes you so much as a viewer for it to be bad that like, oh, Netflix newest show is just gonna automatic. You're like, oh, I can't even. I just can't even.
Yeah, I canceled Netflix years ago and I haven't missed it.
Yeah. It's just unfortunately this is just the state of it. But to bring it back, X Files. It's a great show. It remains time. It's one of those shows like Twin Peaks that is from a certain time, could only have been made in that time, but because of that, it is timeless. Um, and X Files deals with bigger issues too. It's not just like even in these Monster of the Week episodes, there's like the way that this episode is structured deals with like the subjectivity of storytelling, right? That's something that humans have always had to deal with and will always have to deal with, right? Your buddy tell your two different buddies have a completely different version of what happened that one night, things like this. Um, and monsters, right? Monsters are always with us, however we want to define monsters. So X Files is just so timeless and wonderful. I guess for me, it is a cope, but the cope is to just love the old stuff while remaining hopeful for something good coming down the pipeline that's not pure sewage. I don't know. I mean, at least we live in a time. Yeah, we live in a time when there's a lot of bad stuff being made, but we also live in a time when you can have easy access to all this like great classic cinema, classic TV, and it's weird referring to X Files as classic, but it is
Yeah, it
classic.
genuinely is. It's okay to say that.
Yeah, it's
It's
classic.
okay to embrace what we are.
Yeah,
I'm staring down the barrel of 30 and I don't know how the fuck that happened, but here we are.
Yeah, as somebody who's now closer to 40 than to 30, I am like I'm gonna I'm gonna
It's only going to
metaphysically
accelerate for me. I know that.
I'm gonna metaphysically pat you on the head and go, "Oh, don't worry." It gets even more interesting. Yeah. No, I don't know. I think yeah, you just gotta. I don't know. Like cherish these classics. Right? Cherish good storytelling. Everybody who's watching this, go ahead and watch this episode. I know we didn't go as deep into it so much as an exploration of X Files in general and storytelling, but that's also what this channel's about, right? The way humans tell stories. It's a lot of what our episodes end up being about. And yeah, check out Bad Blood. Check out the X Files in general if you haven't watched it. For Pete's sake, it's a modern classic. It really is. Um,
And please do it because it has one of the best characters in TV history, the Smoking Man.
Smoking Man, who you is kind of just like the archetype of of the government, right? Like the smoking man, it kind of is our ruling elite mixed up with the guys in gray who are willing to pull triggers, right? Like it's
He
like they're
is
like,
the actual embodiment of the deep state, and maybe it's
yes,
just my obsession with the deep state, but for me, that makes him one of the most terrifying characters in TV history. To touch on another episode,
yep,
there's the one that's all about him just sitting
the
at
con
that typewriter working
yes
on his
the
memoirs.
the confessions of the cigarette smoking man is that episode. Yeah, that's a classic. And pause if I can twist your arm a little bit. We should have you back on sometime at your convenience. And that one, that's a good one. I had forgotten about that one. We should do an analysis, an expose. Yeah, because he really is. You're right. He really
Yeah.
is. It's like you can use him as a stand-in for everything that you know our kind of guys are having to deal with.
Well, and you can use him as one because he very explicitly is.
Yes.
And that might be an argument for what you're saying about Carter, frankly, is that he was willing to create and have a character like that in the show.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and for Pete's sake, if you're a fan, if you grew up in the '90s, I mean, X Files was showing up in all kinds of places. Bare naked ladies watching X Files with no lights on. Hope the Smoky Man's in this one. I mean, like the show is such a meme. It was so big at the time that you kind of can't. I would argue, and maybe we can explore this when you're back on pause. That there's something about that. In order to truly understand America in the '90s, you kind of have to understand people like I know you're a huge fan, Art Bell, and things like Chris Carter's X Files, because that and Twin Peaks, right? Like this was everywhere. It was in the water. You just literally couldn't avoid it.
Yeah. And, part of that might have been the onset of millenarianism,
Yep.
but, that's still valid, though. And it was very real. I'll throw out another name for you. Bill Cooper was at his height through the 90s right next to Art.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah. So this is and it's interesting to see whatever. Gosh, it's 30 years later now. I keep feeling so old. 30 years later, we have a resurgence of the woo. But it's a very digital woo. And so I guess, dear listeners, check out the pre-digital woo or the early digital woo as codified in the X Files. It's nice. It's cool to see, how the tropes were carried on, and in some cases how the tropes were created. So check it out. Pause. Thank you so much for coming on. Please, one last time, as Cedric the Entertainer would say, one more again. Tell everyone where they can find you and all the cool things you do.
Come and get me at TLE Pause on Twitter. Check out the Timeline Earth podcast wherever you consume podcasts. As you said, join the illustrious board membership that funds one of our co hosts and maybe someday all of us. Join the Scarlet Thread Society Book Club, which funds me specifically. And check out all my affiliated shows and other appearances. They are on basically every podcast you listen to from our sphere. Even if you didn't know I've been on it, I've probably been on it at least once.
Yeah, I keep
And
discovering
I will
new.
give a special shout out to
Yeah.
one that your audience in particular will like, Art of Darkness. Go listen to those guys and pay them too while you're at it.
Art of Darkness is a wonderful podcast. And yeah, pause. I was just going to say, it's surprising how many shows you've actually showed up on. I keep finding new little pause appearances. I'm like, wow, you're networking like crazy, man.
Yeah, people don't know this, but I was even on Pete Q before he was Pete Q, back when it was still Free Man Beyond the Wall.
Holy shit. I didn't know that. Wow. That is talking about you make now I'm feeling even older. Somehow I missed that one. Cool. Well, hey, pause. Thank you again so much. I know it's later there for you than it is for me, so I appreciate it.
Well, it's
Thank you
not
so much
even
for
that
coming on.
late. The deal is I just got to be to work at 4
I understand.
a.m.
I understand. It is late for you, and I appreciate that. So thanks again. Everyone, please like, comment, subscribe. As much as that really helps, I don't know, but it feels nice to see the likes come in. I don't think you're. I
Well, you
think
do it for the love of the game,
you do it
right?
for the love, yeah. And yeah, hopefully you'll be back on soon. I think we got some more Mr. James analysis videos coming once I can get Fred back on. And I was also on Paz's show talking about Mr. James recently, so people check that out too. And yeah, everyone have a great weekend or week whenever this drops. And Paz, let's have you back on. Smoking Man, let's do it.
Let's do it.
All right, thanks everyone. Have a great one. Bye.